Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Light. We thank you for spending part of your Sunday morning with us. Before we get to a big discussion with some great guests this morning, let's check your political headlines from the week. A moving final tribute to an American hero who called Ohio home. Senator and astronaut John Glenn was buried at Arlington National Cemetery Thursday. The moving ceremony came complete with full military honors, a flag for his wife Annie, as well as John's children. He was 95 years old when he died in December. The accolades and accomplishments are so many for Senator Glenn, and he's forever etched in the history books as the first American to orbit the Earth. He served in the Navy, the Marines, of course, an astronaut, U.S. Senator, and he ran for president. He also said he was so fortunate to marry the love of his life, Annie. A special honor for a fallen Hilliard police officer. Senator Jim Hughes worked to rename a stretch of Interstate 270 through northern Franklin County in Hilliard after Officer Sean Johnson was killed last year while training with his motorcycle unit. That accident happened near Easton. He was a 16-year veteran on the force. Most foreclosed homes can no longer be boarded up with plywood. That's thanks to a law taking effect this month. Instead of plywood, abandoned homes would need to be boarded up with a transparent plexiglass-like window. Now, supporters of the new law say it helps to keep home values high in neighborhoods that might have more foreclosed homes out there. But local firefighters say not so fast. Multiple departments tell 10 TV that they have not yet received samples of new transparent boarding material to test it for firefighter safety. Let's introduce some great guests this week. A lot to get to. Returning to our panel, Michael Gonidakis. He is president of Ohio Right to Life and also a member of the State Medical Board. Janetta King joins us this week. She is board president at Innovation Ohio. And we are pleased to welcome Gavin Leonard. He is the state director for One Ohio Now. Thanks to everyone for coming in.
Thank you.
We do appreciate it. Of course, a big headline that is happening nationally and internationally involves Syria. So that's going to be this first topic that we're going to dial into here. And we're going to show you some pictures because you probably saw these late Thursday evening. President Trump approved missile strikes against a military base in Syria. That's where the administration says Syrian chemical attacks originated. We now know that 7 jets were destroyed in that attack. So I want to go around the horn here and just get your first impressions on this. Of course, they talked about it a lot on Face the Nation before we came on here. Janetta, when you heard this news Thursday night, what did you think?
Well, first of all, I thought it was significant that we took action, considering some of the considerations that we give Russia. Right. So the fact that we went after this air base, that we had a very strong response to this chemical attack, I thought was very positive. I think it's going to initially receive bipartisan support for this swift action. Now, fast forward to other actions. I think that the Congress, the Senate, they're going to want to weigh in on how far we do go and before we take any other action. But initially, I think it's positive. It has some bipartisan support. And we saw pictures on our Facebook feeds, on our computers. I mean, I think that the viral videos of these children suffering because of this attack made it really compelling that something had to be done. We
had to blur out those pictures that you're talking about in ways because they were so graphic of sarin gas being used on your own people in Syria. Gentlemen, what did you think? First impressions?
Yeah, I applaud you for not showing those pictures of the dead children. My kids are watching right now, as a matter of fact, and it's haunting. And I can't, and my wife can't get those pictures out of our head. And I don't think the people of this world, regardless of international borders, can. And President Trump did the right thing. I think he sent a message to Syria, and I think this sets up an opportunity to create safe zones in Syria, which is what he ultimately wanted. Now, we don't need to have to. There's no time for political speeches here or blame game, but the president led, he took action, and I think he sent a strong message to not just Syria, but to Russia and other countries that support this abhorrent activity, that it's not going to happen again.
Probably a message as well to the president of China, who he was, when all this was happening, he was entertaining and hosting the president in Florida. Gavin?
Yeah, I don't pretend to be a foreign policy expert, but of course, serious concerns about the issues happening in Syria for the people there, and just hoping for a path toward peace in some way, shape, or form. And that includes, I think, taking seriously allowing refugees from Syria here in our country. This is a global problem, and we're going to have to have some serious global conversation to get to a better pathway forward.
I think a path toward peace is a good way to kind of at least put a ribbon around this particular topic for this morning. Let's come to some state issues, because it was a huge week. We had a State of the State address from Governor Kasich. As a matter of fact, he spent about an hour and a half laying out his big views, or views, I should say, on big issues affecting Ohio. So let's put a few on the screen here, so take a look. Of course, the governor talked about the economy. He talked about more innovation coming from Ohio businesses and manufacturing. The governor also spent a considerable time talking about education and college education. So let's do this. Let's hear from the governor, beginning with his comments on agriculture and manufacturing.
Now, manufacturing and agriculture, of course they matter. They're two cornerstones of our state, but they're changing as well. Look at the auto industry. Engines and transmissions are more powerful, durable, and efficient, more efficient than ever. And in agriculture, you all know up here, farmers are using the latest research to be more productive so food scientists can meet the demands of a growing population around the world. The world's job creators know that we in Ohio make things. That's why they're turning to us for their future success.
That is a great point, because our manufacturing sector is still solid here in Ohio. In the farming sector, of course, we help to feed the world out there. Our Ohio farmers do a tremendous job. I want to ask you about this, though. With automation, Michael, you start us off on this particular topic. With automation out there and technology, aren't there going to continue to be human jobs that are going to be replaced when it comes to technology and automation?
Absolutely, and that's not a partisan issue. It's not a liberal or conservative issue. It's just a fact of life. The world is not changing. It's changed. So we just look at Amazon. 3 years ago, we would have never expected Amazon to come in and invest billions of dollars in Central Ohio. Just last week, they announced 30,000 new jobs. Now, these are jobs that we need to train Ohioans for. So the automation that's taking place, let's look at Honda in Marysville. I have friends that work there, and they said their dads, who used to work at Ford back in the day when they were kids, could never do those jobs today. So with the rapid changing of technology, we need to ensure that our higher education system, or our two-year schools or our career schools, are keeping up the demand of ensuring that our 18 to 22-year-olds are getting that to take these jobs, because God forbid Amazon say, hey, look, we've invested billions, but we can't find anyone to work. That does happen to a degree, but if we continue to force our higher ed to adapt to today's world as opposed to living in a higher ed industry from the 80s or 90s, I think we can meet that demand, but we've got to be careful. Because if we just say, hey, go to college and get that 4-year degree and everything's going to be great, well, we're going to fall short.
Okay. Janetta, what do you think here when it comes to what the governor's saying? We've got to stay, he was saying we have to stay nimble as a workforce.
That's right. Well, these two, manufacturing and agriculture, have been for a long time the cornerstones of Ohio's economy. And we absolutely have to continue to lead in those industries. And it is a workforce issue, it is a training issue, it is a research issue. So I think embracing that, investing in that, is very important. And it was interesting to hear the contrast that Governor Kasich laid out to what President Trump said on the campaign trail, where maybe he was talking about bringing old jobs back. And I think there's a lot of frustration, and people are trying to figure out how to go forward, because I don't think that folks really believe that those old jobs are coming back as much as they want to. And we really do need a path forward that is going to allow us to recover, to lead in the 21st century. And that's going to be a little bit more high tech.
I want to play some comments, and Gavin, I'll have you start off once we hear from the governor one more time. He was talking about technology and education. Here's Governor Kasich.
Are we preparing our kids for what I've been talking about? You think we're ready? I don't think so. But we have to make sure that we create a flexible school system. And I'm with all of you. There's too much testing of these kids all the time. We keep working on it, okay?
So there's a lot there, especially when we get into testing. But Gavin, he also said this. The governor said we can give kids a good education. He didn't say great. He said a good education for a lot less. Do you think we can?
Well, I think this issue was really the foundation of the speech this week, and it really comes back to if we want to have a great state, we've got to have top-notch education from really pre-K all the way through higher ed. So I think you brought up the importance of higher education in manufacturing and agriculture, but on really all of our sectors, what the research shows is that if we have students that are well prepared, that we have higher education, at the end point, but all the way through, that we're going to be able to have higher wages and median wages are going to go up, and then that'll show us improvements in basically every other major area in Ohio. So I think we have a long way to go, and the problem that we're seeing is that the investments aren't necessarily matching the rhetoric on how to address these issues. If we want to get ready for a 21st century economy, we've got to catch up with Florida and Oklahoma and other states that make universal pre-K an option. We've got to get our college affordability back within a range that's reasonable for more people to get that education they need to match those job skills that are in the economy.
I'm glad you brought that up, because Governor Kasich said just a few minutes after those comments, he said universities and colleges are going to price themselves out of business.
I applaud the governor for saying that. And he's been saying that for 7 years now, in his 7th year as governor. And unfortunately, the mighty Ohio State University and our other 4 universities have been able to hire multiple lobbyists and blow back any of the reforms that Governor Kasich wanted to do. One of the top 3 kitchen table issues for every Ohioan, whether it's a family of 4 or a single mom, is how's my child going to afford to go to Ohio State or another 4-year school? And yet they refuse to adopt efficiencies and regulations. And they are going to be a thing of the past if they don't get on the bus and figure out how to cut the cost of a college education.
It's more complicated than that, though. I mean, the reality is that the 2 major ways that we pay for higher education in this state are through tuition and then through state aid. And tuition has continued to go up, but state aid has gone down. And the reality is that even if we make there are, believe me, there's a lot of administrative bloat. There are concerns with athletic programs that are just completely out of whack with the realities of our, of the amount of money that places have. But if we don't address new additional dollars at the state level, as well as getting tuition down, I don't think the equation is going to work.
Let me do this. I've got to take a commercial break, but we'll pick it up right there when we come back. And also, an issue that's close to your heart, we are talking about the gender pay gap here in Ohio and some new numbers that are pretty shocking. So we've got a lot to get to. And still ahead, we also are going to talk about another report about the state of Ohio. We're going to talk about poverty, graduation rates, and hunger here in our state. We'll dive into that when we return. Welcome back, everyone. Our look at Ohio continues. Boy, we had a state of the state. Your organization released a big report that we're going to get to. And Janetta, as promised, I want to get to an event and some more data that came out this week talking about the gender pay gap here in Ohio. It amounts to $12,000 every year for every woman in Ohio. And when you do the multiplication on that, it comes out to nearly a $30 billion loss for just Ohio women. What's happening here? What's an answer? Is there a legislative answer out there? Is there a corporate answer out there that we're just not addressing?
Well, something has to be done, and what you're referring to is on April 4th, we celebrated what's called Equal Pay Day. Right. I guess it's not really a celebration, but it marks the day that women have to work throughout this year to make up for and to catch up to what a man made just in the last year. So yes, this actually does need to be addressed, and I think there are a couple of ways that we could do it. One, there is a state bill, the Ohio Equal Pay Act, and it would have Ohio lead by example. And for those companies that we as a state with taxpayer dollars are going to contract with, it would have us certify that they don't discriminate, that they do pay women equally as men when they are in the same position. And it also says that corporations can't put a gag rule out there that says employees can't talk about pay, because that is a problem. When you don't know that your male counterpart is getting paid more, you can't advocate for yourself. So there are a host of workplace policies that unfortunately just don't reflect the reality of the workforce, which is women are in the workforce. We are getting more education. We are having these challenges as we are balancing what we're expected to do as mothers and caregivers and maybe leaving the workforce for a couple of years to care for a child, a sick parent, trying to re-enter the workforce and catch up in terms of salary. So this is a really big issue. I believe it should be an issue that everyone should care about, because I have to imagine fathers, husbands, they do believe that their wife should be getting paid fairly, especially when compared to a man. So hopefully this is something that we can do some good public policy around with the state bill. There's also a federal bill. Hopefully it's also something that, that businesses and employers can take some steps, and I know some do, to be good actors here and make sure there isn't that discrimination.
Okay, let's broaden out a little bit. You know, let's end that part of the conversation with this. Another figure that I saw, 587,000 Ohio households headed by women. So again, you're talking, you know, sometimes studies and statistics kind of fly at 30,000 feet. These don't, because these get you to the ground level of what's happening in Ohio households. Speaking of which, Gavin, your organization, One Ohio Now, put out an exhaustive report a few days ago, and I'm going to put a couple of highlights on the screen if we could, because let's look at the state of Ohio, where we are in 2017. 1 in 7 Ohioans lives in poverty. We're 44th nationally when it comes to hunger, 39th nationally, infant mortality, and 39th nationally when it comes to high school graduation. Tell us a little bit about, I know you looked at about a dozen metrics here. Tell us a little bit about the methodology to get to some of those statistics.
Yeah, the reason that we did this report, last year we put the first one out, this is our second annual, we were thinking about in the run-up to the State of the State address, the fact that there are individual reports on a whole bunch of different things. If you work around the State House, there's a report coming out pretty much every day on some quality of life issue or economic issue. And then what happens typically in the sort of political realm is that we sort of pick and choose the topics that we want to talk about that make us look the best or make our opponents look the worst. And we felt like it was time to sort of say, let's look at what should a range of metrics be that we should all agree on that could be the kinds of things that say, how are we doing as a state? So we looked at a range of metrics around health and home, so things like how many people have health insurance, how many people, you know, how many houses are foreclosed. Right. And then areas around economy and employment, things just like the unemployment rate that you would expect, as well as issues around education, things like college tuition and high school graduation, as well as then looking at a section around inequality, because as we look at this data, we just can't help but consistently see things like the gender pay gap, other issues around race, around income, and other concerns. So that was sort of our theory, was let's make a report of reports. Full disclosure, you know, this information is essentially the best practice source on lots of other reports that people put together, and we just sort of put it all in one place to say, hey, look, this is the actual reality of what's happening in our state, regardless of what one person might pick or choose to talk about.
I look at something like hunger, you know, and we talked about earlier, Ohio helps to feed the world, and yet a lot of families, 25% of families out there in our state are food insecure. What do we do about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, food insecure, I'm not sure how that's defined. There's obviously not a legal definition. Does it mean, you know, your refrigerator's full or half full? I don't know. But what I do know is, and Gavin, no disrespect, I admire the work. I read the report, and there were some sobering statistics in there. But if you just look at Central Ohio and our collar counties, these statistics that Gavin mentioned are not applicable to Central Ohio. So you're seeing a migration of people from areas of the state that might have less jobs come to areas that have more. So when you focus on a Meigs County in Southeast Ohio, yeah, the economy's terrible down there. They don't have infrastructure, they don't have jobs, but people are leaving Meigs County to come to Franklin County or Delaware County to start a new life. And so we need to embrace the areas that are expanding and growing. I just mentioned earlier, 30,000 new jobs in Central Ohio from Amazon. That's just one company. If you go to Ohio Means Jobs, Scott, any day of the week, ohiomeansjobs.com, there's about 50,000 jobs that pay at least $15 an hour. There's opportunities out there, whether we need to hold people's hand to help them get the job, that offer health care too. We need to do that. Instead of just saying, here's more money for a food bank or here's more money for this, let's help people get out of their situation and get those jobs and get the health care and be able to live their lifelong dreams.
But don't we need statistics and studies like this to kind of bring us out of the bubble of Central Ohio?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you know, you look at Cleveland and Cincinnati. I don't think it's just Central Ohio. They have a great renaissance going on in both of those two cities, too. And I think to a lesser extent, Toledo and Akron's trying, too, and some of the other cities, the urban renaissance I heard earlier, and I think that's true. But yeah, these statistics are important. I'm not negating them or saying anything different, but I'm saying that I'm not sure that paints a full picture, because the opportunities are endless in Ohio currently. And it's not a Republican thing or a Democrat thing. It's just opportunities are there. Companies are begging people, regardless of race, creed, color, sexual orientation, come and take our jobs. We need you.
Okay, Janetta, jump in here.
So as a proud Appalachian, I'm going to take up for Meigs County. I actually think the work that happens at the State House should reflect the needs of all Ohioans. And I think that these statistics are important. And I will offer a suggestion. What do we do about poverty? What do we do about hunger? I think we should talk about wages. I think we should talk about paying people a fair wage so that they can buy food, that they can pay for childcare, that they can pay for their rent and mortgage. And so I think that there are policies out there that we need to do. We are very fortunate to be experiencing a recovery in Columbus and Central Ohio, but that's not the story of the state. We're actually lagging the country in terms of job creation, and I think that's a problem and something that it is the responsibility of our legislators, our policymakers to speak to.
Gavin?
It's very different from place to place. I mean, there are some good things happening in Columbus, but even within Columbus, there are major discrepancies. You have, serious segregation. These issues around race and around income, around gender, they really persist. So what we're trying to say is let's look at the whole thing. You can't, if we're doing statewide policy, you can't just say, look, there's some good stuff going on in Columbus. People are coming here from other places. You have to look at the whole picture. I feel like there's a real challenge there. Right now we're creating mostly low-paying jobs. The reality is that I think it's 11 of the top 12 fastest-growing job sectors are paying a median wage that's lower than, or paying a wage that's lower than the median wage. Okay. So there are jobs that are getting created, but there's not as many as there are in other parts of the country, and they're not very good jobs in the scheme of things.
Let's do this. We're going to continue this discussion online, but for TV, I've got to get to another commercial break. So I thank all of you for being here on a Sunday morning. Thanks, guys. When we come back, it is a term we hear a lot lately, fake news. Next for you, how journalists are asking you to combat it. Stay with us. Hey, do you have a topic we need to talk about here on Face the State? We want to hear from you, and you can find us through social media. In fact, we have a conversation that goes all week long. So like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and take us on the go with our 10TV app. It's free to download from your app stores. We need your help. Those were the first 4 words of Alan Miller's column last week in the Columbus Dispatch. He's editor of the paper. In the spotlight today, combating fake news. Alan Miller writes about the group News Media Alliance, which is organizing media nationally to tell you where to find quality reporting and quality journalism. Mr. Miller's plea was a simple one. Support quality journalism by subscribing to it, reading it, and watching it. Recently, my son told his classmates that I work here at 10 TV. Another student immediately stood up and said, well, if he works for CBS, he's fake news. When he told me that, it didn't make me mad. It made me sad that a myth like that and many others out there are pervasive these days at American dinner tables, on cable TV, and in politics. Scott Pelley anchors the CBS Evening News, and he summed it up this way. Recently, he said, journalism has never been more important to the country than it is right now. There's no democracy without journalism, and the quality of our democracy depends entirely on the quality of our journalism. Alan Miller reminded his readers that just about every media company out there requires employees to follow the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics. We do that here at 10 TV, plus we have our own code of conduct, standards, and ethics that we sign our names to. What does this mean for you? It means we'll continue to do what we've always done, bring you reporting that's factual, in proper context, and unbiased. There's nothing fake about that. As always, I want to hear from you. If you have thoughts about fake news or anything else discussed today, call me or email me. And don't forget this, you can call or email any of our journalists in the 10 TV newsroom. And remember this as well, if it affects you, your family, and Ohio, we're here to make sure those accountable face the state.